There once sat an old abandoned home near Interstate 80 and Highway 65 in Roseville, California, that had a very sad and tragic past. The facade of the building, once left in arrested decay for decades, held only fragments of what once was. The home had belonged to the Purdy family. Rancher Chester Stanley Purdy lived there with his adopted daughter Nadine in the early 1950s. After his wife Edith Ida Purdy passed away in 1940, at some point they moved from Klamath Falls, Oregon down to Roseville, California. According to newspaper accounts, Nadine, who was 24 years old, suffered from some sort of mental or intellectual disability. In his old age, Chester was told by family members that Nadine needed to be put into an institution for her condition. He and his wife had taken care of Nadine from the time she was born, and she knew no other life. Perhaps Chester was aware he was not going to be around much longer, and he knew that in the event of his death, the family would go against his wishes and commit her to an asylum. Sadly, he must have convinced himself there was no other option for Nadine, as he was not going to allow her to be institutionalized. So, on January 27, 1954, when Nadine was out in their yard, he shot her, instantly killing her. Chester was then arrested by Sheriff Charles Ward and put in jail for the murder of his adopted daughter. If the story wasn't bad enough, it turned out that just after completing the first day of his testimony in the trial, Chester Purdy fell ill and died that following Thursday at the Placer County Hospital. His cause of death, partial heart attack and pneumonia. The entire case was dropped since he could no longer be convicted for her death, and the entire ordeal was a shock to the whole community of Roseville at the time, and the story continued to linger. Over the years, the home was rented out, and eventually, it sat abandoned for decades. Teenagers used to break into the empty house at night to see if they could last a night in the old abandoned Stonehouse. Some just went to party and drink, but eventually, it became a place for drugs, vandalism, and eventually turned into a flophouse for squatters. I was able to visit the Stonehouse before it was eventually demolished, and I was able to see it firsthand, including the irreversible damage that had been done to the structure over time. It was completely razed several years back, and all that is left of the memory of this location is the street sign, Stonehouse Court, on the corner of the road nearby. Going back to the story. In his own mind, I'm sure Chester felt it was a mercy killing because he couldn't see Nadine suffer in an asylum, even though he didn't have the right to take another person's life. But perhaps, though, the idea wasn't a new one. It seems that it had all happened once before, only 24 years earlier, to Nadine's biological mother. In my book, Stories of the Forgotten, Infamous, Famous, and Unremembered, I share with you the story in its entirety, leading to the conclusion that history sometimes repeats itself in the strangest of ways, as did in Nadine Purdy's case.